All right, just wanted to make a quick video to go over how rolling an item could work uh, in an RPG. So this system is based off of the general purpose mod system of games like Diablo 2, Path of Exile, and pretty much any other action RPG that's been created in the last 10 or 15 years or so. This has some similarities to how games like World of Warcraft generate their loot, but generally speaking, MMOs tend to be a much more constrained and more streamlined loot generation process. There's not as much randomness involved. It's really about like what item actually dropped. Was it a predefined raid tier epic that we got, or was it just like a randomly generated item like a leather bracer of the monkey or something like that? But for games that are driven off of their loot system, like action RPGs, the system that they've utilized to put together an item is considerably more complex, but hopefully this video helps simplify that quite a bit, because once you understand the process, it's actually pretty easy to see how everything interacts. So let's start at the top. So the game has decided that we need to create a level 17 item. We killed a level 17 boss, and so we're going to create an item. So the very first thing we have to do is we got to determine what is the actual type of the item that we're going to drop. So in this particular game, we've got 5 different types of items. We have weapon, gear, weapon augments, and gear augments, as well as consumables. And then we have a rough weighting on how frequently any of those items should spawn. So here you can see that weapons and consumables tend to spawn the most, and those have a weighting value associated with them. So the way the weighting works is you sum up all of the weights for the relevant items, and then you basically roll a number from 1 to the max, the sum value of these weights. And then that tells you roughly where on the weight table to, which kind of item you create. So if you normalize all those to percentages, then you can see here we have a 28.57% chance to drop a weapon. Same with consumables. And then all the way down to only 8.5% chance to drop a gear augment, because those are a pretty rare item type. So for the purpose of this example, we're going to go ahead and generate a weapon. So we're creating a weapon. Next, we got to choose a base type for the weapon. So this game has 4 different base types illustrated here. We've got a spell sword, an axe, a bow, and a wand. All of these have the same weighting except for the axe, which for some reason is a little bit rarer. So for our example, we're going to go ahead and select a bow. So we're going to create a weapon of type bow. Next, we have to select the rarity that we should use for the item. Oftentimes, there are some external variables that go into this rarity formula. For example, if you kill a boss, maybe it will have a higher tendency to drop rare or epic items than a normal monster would. Or if you kill a very notable boss, like a boss at the end of a major section of the game, then it might be almost guaranteed to drop an epic item or better. So there's sometimes some independent variables that get added to this formula, but for our purposes, we're just going to use a very basic weighting table of these 5 different types. And so we've got, a 30% chance to drop an uncommon, a 1.8% drop chance for the epics. And for our example, we're going to go ahead and generate an uncommon. So the rules for uncommon in our game is that, well, we'll get to that in a minute. So we're creating an uncommon bow. There are tons of mods in the game, but we're going to be rolling mods that are exclusively from the bow mod pool. So bows have their own mod pool. It's a subset of all the mods in the game. Some of those mods could be shared with other weapon types, like swords, but some of those mods might be unique to bows, or they might be weighted heavily for bows. So now, but I guess before we get into all the mods, we have to get some base stats on this weapon. So every weapon's got to have some base damage, a base attack rate, and a trajectory. So we're going to roll these from a subset of the bow mods that are only used as base mods. They're never used otherwise. So these mods form the baseline for an item, they don't exist in the bow mod pool such that you could just roll them arbitrarily on any given item. The reason for that is because they're the base values. So these are like the foundation that the bow is built on. So we can see here that we have a level/hazard required field. So we said way back at the beginning, we're creating a level 17 item. So we know that the mods available have to be level 17 or less. So we've got this big table of damage mods that we could roll. But we can see here that starting at tier 6, all of these are not available because our item is not high enough level. So the effect that has on the pools, so normally the weighting would look like this, a 2.8% chance to get the very best or the second best damage roll, a very, very slim chance to get the very best damage roll. But because we're not a high enough level for any of these tiers past 6, what it does is it effectively removes all of these from the weighting table. And so now instead of these having some weight, they have 0%. And then all of that weight that was occupied, for these tiers is distributed among these tiers, proportional to these weights here. So for our example, we're going to roll the tier 4 mod, which is anywhere from 21 to 30 damage. And we'll get to what value that actually is a little bit later. And then we also need an attack rate mod and a trajectory mod. So let's pretend we rolled a mod that says 1.5 to 2.0 attack rate per second. So that's like 1.5 or 2 attacks per second. And let's also pretend that we rolled a trajectory mod that says curves wicked sharp to the left. So now, we talked about rarity earlier. We rolled an uncommon rarity bow. So uncommon in our game means that we're going to add 2 additional mods from the totally random bow mod pool. So the bow mod pool could look like this. It could have a bunch of different kinds of mods and probably is a lot larger than this. I would wager this probably kind of gets into 15 or 20 different mod types that could appear on the bows. And then they each have their different weightings as well as that same level required field that we had before. So we have to do the same thing here where we remove any ineligible mods from the pool. So this is level 20. We're only level 17, so we'll remove that weighting. And the same for splash damage down here. So you can see it lightly recalculated all these other weights. And now we would roll against this table. And for our example here, we've selected an attack rate mod and a projectile speed mod. Now before we go on, there's one other important thing, and that is that any mod that's already on the weapon actually affects the mod pool for that weapon in the future. So let's say that we rolled the attack rate mod first. Well, you can't have multiple of the same mod. The mods are unique such that you'll only have one attack rate mod. Now it's important to note that this attack rate mod is a little bit different than this attack rate mod, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But let's say we add the attack rate mod. What that does is it actually removes attack rate from appearing in the pool going forward. So now when we roll for our second mod, the pool actually looks like this. And so we would then select, for our example, projectile speed, and now we got it. So if we had to roll a third mod, then the pool would look like this. We're almost guaranteed to get a damage mod. It's a very high probability. So moving on, now we've got our 2 mods. We've got our adds attack rate mod and our adds projectile speed mod, as well as all of our base stats that we picked out over here. Next, we have to determine the tier of these mods. So you'll notice that this table looks very, very similar to this table over here. It's just a tier table where each of the further tiers has less and less probability of actually showing up. So we'll fill these values in. And we've also got the level required field here again. So we're going to make our modification to the pool. All those numbers that I just filled in. Now we can see that we just roll between one of these 3 options. Each of them have 1/3 of a chance to happen. So we're going to go ahead and pick the middle one. And then let's also pretend that we rolled a tier 2 projectile speed mod for this mod, and that would represent 20 to 40% projectile speed. So now we've got all of our base stats, we've got all of our additional modifiers on the weapon. Now we got to determine what the actual values of those modifiers are. And this part is probably the easiest part of the whole thing because it's literally just math.random against this range. So I'll show you the formula here. You could see the mod rolls from 21 to 30 damage. So what we do is we do max minus min times math.random, which is our value here, plus min. And then that gets us our value. So if we rolled this really low math random of that's 1.9% or 0.019, that represents a very, very low roll on the damage thing, 21.17, and that gets rounded down to 21. Then we do the same thing for our attack rate. 1.5 to 2.0, we rolled roughly 51%. So about halfway in between those two, 1.5 and 2.0 is 1.75. And then, of course, that would get rounded maybe to the second decimal or something because this is a float number. And then curves wicked sharp to the left. There's nothing to roll here, but maybe that could actually be a mod. Maybe the thing that it would roll would be the angle of degrees, like how sharp to the left it rolls. But we're just going to say that mod is static and doesn't have any roll. And then we just repeat the same process with the attack rate, wind up with 24% additional attack rate, and then 38% additional projectile speed. And now we have our finished bow. So we've got a name. This name was probably also generated, but we're just talking about mods and stats here, so I didn't cover that. It's a level 17 uncommon bow. And then it's got the 3 base mods, the damage, attack rate, and trajectory mods. Deals 21 damage a hit, attacks at a rate of 1.75 times per second. Projectiles curve wicked sharp to the left. And then the 2 uncommon mods that we added are 24% attack rate and 38% projectile speed. And so there you go. This is how we generated our example bow. And so this exact same process could be, extrapolated out to all the different base item types. The weapons, gears, weapon augments, gear augments, consumables, etc. Then pools for each of the different weapon types and gear types and all that stuff. And then actually the mods that could appear on those things. And there you have it, a working loot generation system for an action RPG style game.